In July 2019, the quiet suburban neighborhood of Sticklare in Sydney, Australia, became the center of a tragic and horrific crime that would send shockwaves throughout the nation. Jessica Camilleri, a 25-year-old woman with a long history of mental health issues, was arrested for the brutal killing and decapitation of her mother, Rita Camilleri. This case not only brought to light the devastating consequences of untreated mental illness, but also raised questions about the support systems available for individuals suffering from complex psychiatric conditions and the responsibilities of family members to provide care. Early life and background. Jessica Camilleri was born in 1994 in Western Sydney. From a very young age, Jessica exhibited developmental delays and behavioral issues that indicated she might face significant challenges throughout her life. Diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, ASD, intellectual disability, and intermittent explosive disorder, Jessica found it difficult to fit into a conventional schooling environment. Her behavioral issues were often marked by extreme aggression and outbursts, which her family struggled to manage. Growing up, Jessica's mother, Rita Camilleri, took on the role of her primary caregiver. Rita dedicated her life to supporting Jessica, doing her best to help her navigate a world that often seemed overwhelming and hostile. Despite Jessica's conditions, Rita continued to provide for her, loving and nurturing her daughter through all the difficulties that came with raising a child with significant mental health challenges. However, as Jessica grew older, her behavior became increasingly erratic and difficult to control, which put a tremendous strain on their relationship. Jessica's fascination with violent horror films, particularly those depicting graphic violence and decapitation, became a significant source of concern for her mother and others who knew her. Films like The Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Saw were among her favorites, and Jessica would often watch them repeatedly. She began mimicking scenes from these films, obsessively reenacting violent acts and discussing them at length. Her fixation on decapitation was particularly disturbing, and she would often talk about wanting to carry out the actions she saw in the movies. She also became known for making threatening phone calls to strangers, sometimes reaching up to 100 calls a day, where she would threaten to decapitate the person on the other end of the line. Despite these red flags, Jessica's family felt trapped in a cycle of denial and helplessness. Rita and other family members tried various strategies to help Jessica manage her behaviors, but the lack of consistent professional support and a cohesive mental health plan left Jessica without the tools she needed to function in society. As Jessica's violent tendencies continued to escalate, the situation became increasingly dire, but no intervention seemed to have a lasting effect. The day of the incident. The tragic events that unfolded on the evening of July 20, 2019, seemed to be the inevitable culmination of years of tension and worsening mental health. On that evening, tensions between Jessica and Rita reached a boiling point. Jessica's behavior had become more erratic, and Rita, concerned for both her own safety and that of her daughter, called emergency services to ask for help. Unfortunately, this call marked the beginning of the tragic sequence of events that would change their lives forever. During the call, an argument broke out between Jessica and Rita. What exactly transpired during the argument remains unclear, but it quickly escalated into a violent confrontation. Jessica, who had already demonstrated a propensity for violent outbursts, attacked her mother with multiple kitchen knives. In a frenzied attack, Jessica stabbed Rita over 200 times. The sheer violence of the assault left the scene unrecognizable, with blood splattered throughout the house. Several of the knives broke during the attack, further underlining the extreme nature of the violence. After killing her mother, Jessica went one step further, carrying out an act of unimaginable brutality. She decapitated her mother's body and placed the severed head on the footpath in front of a neighbor's house. Jessica then proceeded to stand nearby, covered in blood, as the gruesome scene unfolded. The horrific nature of the crime would leave the entire neighborhood in shock, struggling to comprehend what had just happened. Arrest and initial statements. When the police arrived at the scene, they found Jessica standing beside her mother's head, covered in blood. She did not attempt to hide or flee from the scene. Instead, she immediately confessed to the crime, stating, "I killed my mom. My mom's head is over there." Jessica's seemingly nonchalant reaction to the brutal murder was chilling, further compounding the horror of the situation. She was taken into custody without incident, And as the investigation unfolded, more unsettling details about her state of mind began to emerge. During her initial questioning, Jessica expressed confusion and a lack of understanding of the gravity of what she had just done. She reportedly asked officers if her mother could be brought back to life, showing little to no remorse for the act of violence she had just committed. In addition to asking about the possibility of resurrection, Jessica also inquired about the death penalty, seemingly unaware of the seriousness of her actions. She appeared to be in a state of shock and denial, and her inability to comprehend the consequences of her actions highlighted her deep mental health issues. Jessica initially claimed that she had acted in self-defense, alleging that her mother had attacked her first. However, this version of events was quickly proven to be inconsistent with the evidence found at the scene. Forensic analysis and psychiatric evaluations would later reveal that Jessica's behavior on that day was not a result of self-defense, but rather a manifestation of her untreated mental illness, which had spiraled out of control. Legal proceedings. Jessica Camilleri was charged with murder and stood trial in the New South Wales Supreme Court. The case quickly became a complex legal battle that involved a mixture of criminal responsibility and mental health considerations. The defense team argued that Jessica's mental impairments, including autism spectrum disorder, intellectual disability, and intermittent explosive disorder, played a significant role in her actions and should mitigate her responsibility for the crime. Psychiatric assessments conducted during the trial confirmed that Jessica had multiple serious mental health conditions that contributed to her inability to control her actions. These conditions made it difficult for Jessica to understand the consequences of her actions, and experts testified that she was prone to uncontrollable rage attacks, especially when under stress or confronted with a perceived threat. However, while her mental state was a significant factor in the crime, the prosecution maintained that the brutality and premeditated nature of the killing could not be ignored. The prosecution also highlighted Jessica's history of violent behavior and obsession with horror films as contributing factors. They argued that Jessica had been fixated on violent acts, including decapitation, for a long time before the attack, and that this obsession played a role in the violence that unfolded. The jury ultimately found Jessica guilty of manslaughter due to substantial impairment by mental illness, rather than murder, acknowledging her mental health condition while holding her accountable for her actions. In March 2021, Jessica was sentenced to 21 years and 7 months in prison, with a non-parole period of 16 years and 2 months. The court emphasized the need for a balance between justice and compassion, recognizing Jessica's mental health issues while ensuring that she would be held accountable for the death of her mother, life in prison, and subsequent incidents. Jessica's time in prison has been marked by further violent behavior. In 2021, she assaulted 2 female prison guards at Silverwater Jail. In one incident, she pulled out a significant amount of a guard's hair, causing physical injury and psychological trauma. As a result, Jessica received an additional 22-month sentence, with a non-parole period of 12 months, effectively extending her earliest possible release date to July 2032. Reflections and impact. The case of Jessica Camilleri underscores the complexities of dealing with individuals who have severe mental health issues. It raises critical questions about the adequacy of mental health support systems and the challenges faced by caregivers. Rita Camilleri's dedication to her daughter, despite the risks, highlights the profound love and commitment of a mother. However, it also points to the need for better resources and interventions to prevent such tragedies. Jessica's actions were undeniably horrific, but they also reflect the consequences of untreated and unmanaged mental illness. The legal system's acknowledgement of her mental impairments in the sentencing demonstrates a nuanced approach to justice, balancing accountability with compassion. The horrific events that unfolded in St. Clair serve as a stark reminder of the importance of mental health awareness, early intervention, and support for both individuals and their families. While Jessica Camilleri will spend a significant portion of her life in prison, the broader societal lessons from this case continue to resonate, emphasizing the need for comprehensive mental health care and the protection of vulnerable individuals.